Hello, my name is Charles, and I'm going to start this video a little bit differently. I'm going to start it by showing you the end result, and then throughout the video I'll show you how I got there. I am now making Flieger style 42 millimeter wristwatches from 1930s to 1950s Hamilton size 10 pocket watch movements. What you see on the screen now are examples of the watches that I am offering for sale. Throughout the video, I'll tell you what makes these watches special, and some history about the Hamilton Watch Company, and a little bit about my process. I start with pocket watch movements that have had their cases scrapped by precious metal refineries. The refineries are buying up these pocket watches because they have little value these days as nobody carries them anymore. They're pulling out the movements and then melting down the gold and silver cases for their bullion value. So I pick through as many of these movements as I can find and cherry pick the best of them to make wristwatches out of. As you can see, this movement is very clean, doesn't have any scratched plates, no major issues. It's not currently running, but we'll get to that. They even have picked the numerals off of the dial because there was some gold in the numerals. All of that is of no consequence. I am going to refurbish this movement using all modern synthetic oils and a new white alloy mainspring, and leave it running better than it did when new, and as well as any modern mechanical watch runs. I'm going to give it a new dial, new case, new hands, new sapphire crystals front and back, and a new band. And we're going to make a retro modded or homage to a vintage World War II era Flieger watch. In the 1940s, wristwatches were becoming more and more popular as pocket watches fell out of fashion. However, wristwatches with their smaller size were just not as accurate as the pocket watches were. Realizing this, the Imperial Air Ministry of Germany decided to use pocket watch movements in their Flieger watches. The characteristics of a Flieger watch were to be that it be 55 millimeters in diameter, so it would be big enough to be viewed easily on the wrist. It would have a large onion-shaped crown so that it could be wound in the cockpit with gloves on. It would have a triangle with two dots at the 12 o'clock position on the dial so you could easily tell which direction was up. It should have no writing on the dial to distract from the reading of the numerals. It were to have a luminescent dial with radium numerals so it could be seen in the dark. It were to have a hacking movement. It was to be regulated and tested and proven to keep time as a chronometer. It were to have a Breguet balance hairspring. The strap was to be extra long so it could optionally be worn over the jacket, and it was to have rivets so that it would be extra strong. My homage to the Flieger is 42 millimeters in diameter, simply because I believe that is the perfect size wristwatch these days, and is just big enough to fit the size 10 pocket watch movements that I want to use in it. I have scaled down the size of the onion-shaped winding crown to be practical on the wrist and to look appropriate to the diameter of the watch. The dial is in keeping with the traditional Flieger style dial with the triangle and two dots at 12 o'clock. A simple dial with no writing, nothing to distract the pilot other than the numerals. Instead of radioactive radium luminescence, I have opted for C1 luminescent paint, which glows brightly in the dark. I regulate and test these to their best possible timekeeping. They do have Breguet balance springs, and I use riveted leather straps with an oversized milled stainless steel buckle to finish off the Flieger motif. I have chosen to use the Hamilton caliber 917 and 921 pocket watch movements in these cases because I feel that they came from the pinnacle of American watchmaking. They were made between 1936 and 1954 at the end of the pocket watch's run. Depending on the caliber, they have either 17 or 21 fine ruby and sapphire jewels. They could have gold train wheels and fine regulation, Breguet overcoil hairsprings. They were adjusted to 3 positions and temperature, and they have pretty much everything that you want to see when you look through the observation back on these beautiful watches. The Hamilton Watch Company was established in 1892 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where they made watches continuously until 1969 when they were moved to Switzerland. Through a series of mergers and acquisitions, the Hamilton Watch Company eventually became integrated into the Swatch Group, where the Hamilton name is still being used. So now that you know a little bit about Flieger watches and the watch that we're making, I'm going to watch along with you and narrate what you're seeing on the screen for a while. We're doing a full servicing on this movement, which means we're going to remove every screw from it. We are going to ultrasonically and mechanically clean the movement. Here, I'm checking the side shake that the mainspring arbor has in the plate. This one is very tight and needs no adjustment because this movement has seen very little use. If there were excessive side shake, I would reduce the size of the hole in the plate while I have the plate off of the movement. During the disassembly, all of the tolerances are checked so that during reassembly they can be set to the factory specifications again if they are out. The caliber 917 movement that we're working with today replaced the caliber 912. The 917 had several technological advantages over the 912. It was designed to be anti-magnetic. It is a positive set pocket watch, meaning that the stem is held in like a modern wristwatch, not like the vintage pocket watches that came before it. It has an Elenvar hairspring, which was an improvement over the blued steel hairsprings that would expand and contract with temperature. And because of that, it has a monometallic balance wheel. Here on the screen right now, I am removing the click. The click is what holds the charge in the mainspring when you wind it and keeps it from automatically unwinding as soon as you let go of the winding crown. And spinning the movement around here, we'll pull out the rest of the screws, which hold the barrel bridge onto the movement. This blued screw, which I'm removing now, actually passes all the way through the movement and holds onto the setting lever. This is the screw that you loosen when you want to pull the stem out of the watch. No, this is the last screw in the barrel bridge. We'll go ahead and pop off this barrel bridge and see what it looks like under here. As you can see, there's a lot of grime on top of that mainspring barrel. I'm sure this movement hasn't been serviced in 50 years or so. Pull out this mainspring barrel, and there's some very gooey old grease in there. We'll set the mainspring barrel aside for a little bit. We're not able to pull out this winding pinion and clutch because they've broken off the stem inside of the movement when they pulled it out when they pulled the movement out at the precious metal refinery. They just tend to punch the movements out of the cases so they can melt down the gold. We'll replace that stem when we reassemble the movement. A little curious about this blue on the movement. Wanted to make sure it wasn't plating that had failed and oxidation coming through from the bottom, but it's not. It's just something that got stuck on there over the years. Checking the end shake and all the train wheels, they're all tight, as they pretty much always are on these movements. I don't think I've ever seen a caliber 917 or 923 that is worn in the train. These are very well made movements and will last 300 plus years if they're properly maintained. So now we're pulling off the train wheel bridge and get the train wheels out of there. And again, the natural oils that were used back in the day are so gummy and greasy that the wheels are sticking in and won't even come out of their pivots. It's probably a mostly forgotten fact by now, but there was a time back in the early days when watchmakers would rub the grease off of their forehead and use it as watchmaker's grease when assembling a movement. These days we use all synthetic oils that will give you a 10-year service interval instead of 3 like it was back in the day. With airtight cases and synthetic oils, we're able to stretch out the life of the oil by quite a bit. And outside of a lot of gummy oil, there's nothing wrong with this movement at all. We'll pull out these last few screws on the dial side of the movement and put everything into our cleaning basket. This is the keyless works. This is what allows you to set the time and switch between the time setting and winding functions of the watch. Again, lots of gooey old oil in there, but otherwise it's in good shape. You got to be careful with the spring that is pushing the lever right there. That spring likes to pop off and join the space program, but we got it safely. Now we'll pull off this cap jewel on the balance wheel. The cap jewels are something that a lot of lazy watchmakers get lazy about removing and working with. They feel like they can just inject some new oil in there once it's run through the cleaning machine and it'll be fine. But especially when working with older watches that have been sitting for so long, you really need to pull every screw out, pull the caps off, clean the back sides of the cap jewels, and put it all together before relubricating. Anything less would be an incomplete job. And when I put this all back together and get it on a timing machine, you'll see that the thorough job pays off in the timing results. And that's pretty much it for the movement. We still need to bring that mainspring barrel back and disassemble the mainspring barrel. I am going to toss the blued steel mainspring that's in here. I use a white alloy mainspring on anything I service these days because the white alloy is a improvement over the old blued steel, and there's absolutely no reason to not use a better quality mainspring when you can. And actually this one, once I pull it out of here, we find out that the spring was broken. That's probably when the watch got put away because it was no longer working. And it probably sat in the drawer for about 50 years before the value of the gold in the case became more than the value of a watch itself. So somebody sold the watch to probably one of these events that people hold to buy old jewelry, and they just sold it for the scrap value, and the movement ended up with me. So here I've put the movement into the basket I just put onto the cleaning machine, and we're going to run it through my cleaning machine. It's a 5 minutes per cycle. I'll fast forward through this here and just give you an idea of what it is without making you watch 15 minutes of the machine agitating. Reassembly is just the opposite of disassembly with a little bit of lubrication added in. So instead of narrating to you, I'm going to play some classical music and let you watch. I'll come back and narrate once the movement's done being assembled. So let's get our balance wheel in here and give it a little flick and see if it wants to run. And there we go. And I'll give it a second to get up to speed, and it looks like it's going to have a nice strong amplitude, which tells us we did our job right. Let's go ahead and get our balance corkscrew in, and then we'll put this on the Timegrapher. On the Timegrapher, we're looking to see beat error inside of 1 millisecond and an amplitude of over 280 for my standards. Most people would say a vintage pocket watch should be over 220, but I find that with a new mainspring and the full service, these always want to run well over 280. And this one we're looking at 263. It's only been running for about 10 seconds at this point, so let's give it a few seconds. And looks like the amplitude's still coming up. We're going to play ping pong here at the regulator to bounce it back and forth, try to find the spot where we get very near to like +1 or +2 seconds a day. And the longer it runs, the more those oils are spreading out, the better it's looking. So now we're at over 314 degrees of amplitude and 0.2 milliseconds of beat error with a average rate of about 2 seconds a day, maybe +1, about the same dial up and down, so I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and get our cannon pinion and our hour wheel on, and then we can drop our dial on and start casing up this watch and finish it up. So the cannon pinion gets the special blue grease, which allows it to slip when you set the time, but not slip when it's running under its own power. Our wheel gets a little bit of oil underneath it before you put it on. And now our Flieger dial, which I had custom made. I had these made with the dial feet where they're supposed to be. These aren't ETA 6497 dials that have had the feet cut off and glued on in a different position. These are actually made for this movement. I had them use C1 luminescent paint, better than what most Fliegers are using, and it makes a nice package when you put it all together. So with the dial on, we can move on to casing the movement. This case, again, I had designed specifically to fit the Hamilton size 10 pocket watch movements. The case is not any larger than it needs to be to comfortably fit the movement. The movement's a snug fit in the case so it doesn't rattle around inside. No casing ring is needed. The window in the case back has been cut specifically to the size of the movement. No clipping off of the edges of the movement is seen through the window. The case back and case front are both sapphire glass, and the case is as thin as it can be to house this movement. So as I've been talking, I've been oiling up the stem here. We will pop this stem back in and get back into installing the casing screws. While I flip it over, I will pop on the bezel and crystal so that we don't damage the dial. And the crystal and the bezel does thread onto the front so that it's a higher waterproof rating. A pop-on bezel is never as watertight as a screw-on bezel and case back. This is a 5 atmosphere water resistant watch. It has seals at all entry points, and we'll test that and demonstrate that in a minute here. So as you can see, we're able to use this movement with no modifications whatsoever to the movement itself. So if at any time anybody were to want to put this back into a pocket watch case, it would go back in with no issues.
So here we'll pop our case back gasket back on, thread on our case back, so we can get back to working on the front side of the watch. And now it's time to get our hands on. Again, these hands are the same C1 luminescent paint as the numerals on the dial are. And here we'll use a little bit of Rodico to dab up the marks on the center of the minute hand here that the hand tool is left. A little bit of oil that is transferred. Rodico is really great stuff for a watchmaker. It picks up loose dust and loose oil, cleans off your tips of your tools, and really indispensable if you're a hobbyist watchmaker and haven't tried it. You need to get some of that. We'll pop on our second sand here and bring the hour hand around to make sure it clears underneath the second sand. We'll wind up the watch so that the second sand starts running here, and we'll make sure it clears all the way around on the bottom side of that hour hand. We'll use a little bit more Rodico to pick up any stray dust I can find before we pop on this crystal for the last time. And on with the bezel and crystal. And with the case all closed up, we can now move on to pressure testing. Again, we pressure test these at 5 ATM, which is 50 meters water resistance. The way this pressure tester works is we hang the watch above the water and then pressurize the vessel. Once pressurized, we let the watch sit there for a couple of minutes so that if there are any leaks in the watch, the high pressure air will leak into the watch, making the pressure in the watch 5 atmospheres. Once we lower the watch into the water and start releasing the pressure in the pressure vessel, if there is high pressure air inside the watch, you will see a stream of bubbles coming out from the source of the leak. And since the pressure inside the watch is greater than the pressure outside, the water won't start getting in until the bubbles stop coming out. If there is a leak, all you have to do is pull the watch up above the water line before the bubbles stop streaming out. As long as bubbles are still streaming out, air is coming out and water is not getting in. So here we can see there are no bubble streams coming out. And if you do want to see a watch fail a pressure test, I do have another video. If you see my other videos, the Rolex failing at the winding ground. So you can go check that out after this if you like. Moving on to a demonstration of the luminous on the dial. We have here one of my dials besides one of my competitors' dials, and a 7 minutes elapsed video here in just a few seconds. You can see that by the end of 7 minutes the competing dial has completely gone dark, and the C1 luminous is still nice and bright and visible. And that's pretty much it for the assembly of the watch. We will go ahead and pop on a band here. I use bands that I install quick release bars in, which means you can pop on and pop off the band with just your thumbs. I also give a second band with every watch that I sell, a brown band and a black band, so you can match the color of your belt and shoes if you want. I also feel that the brown looks better on the blue and green dialed watches, but that's obviously a personal choice, and you get both bands to change as you please. Again, here's the watch and different dial color combinations that are available, and all that's left is to put this in its presentation box and ship it off to its new owner. We make these boxes here in house, laser cut foam padding specifically made to the size of the watch, all nice and neat. And that's it. If you're interested in one of these watches, see the links in the item description below, or scan the QR code at the top right corner of the screen throughout the video. Head on over to my website and check them out. You can contact me directly with any questions, and I appreciate you watching to the end. If you would please comment, like, and subscribe, it helps with the YouTube algorithm more than you know, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you.